You enter the tavern, and the waft of venison stew greets your senses. The din of conversation from one side of the room to the other kind of echoes across your ears, and a strange cloaked figure sits in the corner. He appears to have his eye on you. Okay, we've all done it. We've all started a D&D game in the tavern. It's one of the most common tropes in Dungeons and Dragons, the tavern scene, lifted straight out of The Prancing Pony from Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. We've all created that scene for our players or been the player walking into that scene. And there's plenty of good reasons to start a game in a tavern, but what if you don't want to? What if you would rather do something different? Well, here you go. This is 10 different ways to start in a tavern. And this video is kind of unique because it's a two-part video, and it's a collaboration with Ryan Doyle from Verdigris Table. He has a lot of good D&D content on his channel, so we got together and brainstormed 10 different ways to not start in the tavern. And half of this list is on his channel, and the other half is right here. And you can watch this one and then watch his, or watch his and watch mine. Either way, you get a full list of ways to not start in a tavern. I'm Brad Wolf, and this is Diredan, and I'm here today with Ryan Doyle from Verdigris Table. Welcome, Ryan.
Hey, thanks for having me, Brad. This is great. I'm glad we got to do this.
You might recognize Verdigris Table from a recent video I did where I covered his Kickstarter. And remind me the name of that again, Explosive Creation.
That was yeah, explosive is the important part. The Game Master's compendium of explosive creation. It's a mouthful, and I appreciate it. You had a good take on it. It was very cool to see it in the hands of other people, like other talented game masters, dungeon masters messing around with it. Everyone brought their own perspective to it. It's pretty cool. I'm excited to get that into more hands soon. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to get the final version. It looks like a great tool set, and I'm currently working on a video of like how to prepare to improv, where I'm going over a bunch of good resources that generate ideas. Yours is going to be on my short list from now on. Like it's definitely probably top 5 resources that I'm going to be using moving forward. It looks like a great book. I'm excited to see the final version.
That's very kind of you to say. I appreciate that. I set out to make the thing that I want to have at the table, like behind the screen with me, so I can make players care about the campaign. But the challenge then is making people feel connected to the story that's already written down in the book.
Right.
So that's where a lot of that like customization comes in.
And I love that aspect of it as well. And today we're talking about how to start an adventure. We're focused on 10 ways to not start in a tavern. So we each have 5 ideas of how you can start an adventure without using a tavern. Not that there's anything wrong with starting in a tavern.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
But we're going to give you some good ideas of how you can start your campaign without starting in the tavern.
Yeah, so one interesting one that is we both kind of came up with independently and combined for like a twofer is the old in media res, which that's a film school term, or maybe that could be the old Greek philosophy. I forget the origins of that. I didn't look it up, but it means in the midst of the action. So I mean, we've been talking a lot about strong starts as opposed to you're sitting around at a tavern and the waitress comes up and asks you what you want to drink. So opening with combat, and not just you are sitting around the bar and the bar fight breaks out. Like, roll for initiative. You're in the middle of fighting, this bugbear boss at level 1. It's like, why? How? It's like, nope. We'll get to that. Roll for initiative, or else he's going first. And then cut to how did we get there?
Right.
Because now you're salivating for that. You know it's coming. And you can do some really interesting narrative things too, but like you're already hooked because you've already been there. So now there's no question that you're going there. And then you get all the good getting to know you stuff too on the way if you need it. But first, we start by rolling dice and risking lives and using all these abilities on our character sheet we've been looking at for 2 weeks as we build our characters.
Right. Yeah. And the other one I've done is be in the middle of a heist. So instead of a
Mm,
combat, you're like in a skill challenge. You're
mm,
you're in the middle of the museum stealing the MacGuffin, and then flashback, you know, how did you get here? Flashback, you know, how do we get out of this situation? What did you do to prepare ahead for this situation? Right. So
mm,
you're doing that skill challenge, and then things go horribly wrong, and then flashback. What was your backup plan? Right.
mhm.
And of course, that's an idea that I stole from Blades in the Dark. Right. That they actually have a flashback mechanic in that game. But
Which is
yeah,
brilliant. Steal from your favorite books and movies, but steal from games too. Every game is a Frankenstein homebrew version of what came before it.
exactly. Yeah, I think I have a video where I start with that, like, homebrew is the most D&D thing of all. So the immediate res is a great way to, like, just throw players into a situation, and again, you could combine that with any of the things on the list, right?
Mm, mhm.
Um, and just throw the players into the action, and then use that flashback as a way to let the players explain why they're here, or how they're going to get out of here, because like they've got this flashback in their pocket that they can use to set up a way out or a way in or whatever they're doing.
Get them hooked right out of the gate, right? Because a lot of people, you sit down, you want to get the dice rolling, right? And you can delay that gratification, right? But you can start right away with, even the skill challenge, right? The heist, or, even the natural disaster, right? If the natural disaster is unnatural, it's a consequence of some, misbegotten experiment or something that they stumbled into.
Hmm.
Go back to now we start in the tavern, right? You want to start in the tavern and do anything on the list that we've spoken about so far? You can have it both ways. You can do it all. You can combine all of these. That would be an interesting experiment. That'll be the bonus episode next time. One giant mega scenario.
Yeah. Well, one thing I find about the in media res start is this great way to start a game for new players, because
Mm,
you just start in combat. So
mhm.
you're basically teaching them how to play, because your first encounter is the combat. After they've had that combat and they figure out, okay, so everything's about a d20, I got that, and we can go from there. Like, so that happens a little more organically once you get their nerves settled, get that teaching out of the way with the first combat, and then you flash back to like set up the scenario. Who are you guys? How do you know each other? Where are you going next?
Because there's a base level of understanding that you want established first for that story side of things. And if I'm a brand new player and I'm worried about getting it wrong or being bad at math because I think it's much more complex because it looks scary. There's all these like, is this trigonometry? There's a lot of shapes and a lot of numbers on this piece of paper here. It's just like, oh, I can 7 plus 2. Okay, yeah, I'm okay. But like to let them like sink into that, understand things a little bit. And honestly, I'll kind of understand how their character works too in some ways. If you start with a fight and you are a rogue or you're a paladin, you're going to handle yourself differently in that combat, and that's probably not necessarily, you can go against type, but like that's probably going to say something about the kind of person that you want to portray as your character, especially maybe like younger new players who just want to bash stuff.
Right.
I was like, oh, okay, we got the bashing part now. Like, what makes this game interesting is there's other parts too. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and again, it gets the flashback part of doing the strong start in media res, and then flashback to kind of explain the situation. Again, you're getting the players bought in.
Mm.
You're letting them help build the world, even if it's just this small little part of the world, right? Why are you in this dungeon? How did you get here? Where are you from? And then, but between now and your next session, you can use all those things that they made up at the table and weave them into future elements of the adventure or the campaign that you're running.
I just had a really like flash of insight of like, let's say you actually didn't have that much time to prep.
Right.
And you wanted to get like 5 or 6 encounters on paper, but like you really know what the boss fight's going to be, and you kind of know what the beginning is. You're a little fuzzy on the middle, and like something came up, and you didn't have time. And all right, we'll start with the end. You want to get that in, right? It's the one shot. We want to make sure we get the end in there, and then okay, we'll start with the beginning. And what do you guys think happens between, right? Now it's more collaborative storytelling. It doesn't have to necessarily be the dungeon master revealing that they didn't do their homework. Now you're getting a lot more player input and therefore player buy-in.
Right. Yeah, and that's the other thing too is like you were saying about the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide that starts with, you know, like here's the, how to build a continent and here's how to build a financial economy and all these things that are in that. Like the first couple of chapters of that DM's guide is all this world building stuff. But ultimately, all you need, like we said before, is just a couple simple locations, and then just listen to your players and build it out from there, and kind of spiral out to a bigger world from
Mhm,
those couple of locations, and when
mhm,
whatever your players bring to the table. I'm a gnome from a forest. All right, now you need to put a forest on your map somewhere, right? I'm a Goliath from the mountains, so now you need some mountains on your map somewhere, right? So you just take those pieces that the players bring with their characters, and then that fleshes out the wilderness around those two simple locations you start with, the town and the dungeon, and then your players build the rest, and then you build out from there,
mhm.
right?
This video is not just relevant for these videos, I should say, is not just relevant for level one, because like a campaign is basically a series of beginnings, right? And there are natural points, right? Like if you end, we fade to black with the players taking a long rest and or the player characters taking a long rest in the dungeon. That's where we're going to pick up next time. But like sometimes an arc finishes and we need to start a new one. Maybe we're going to insert some like downtime to let the thing breathe a little bit. So like having a bag of maybe we did start in the tavern, but that
Mhm.
was 4 levels ago, and now we're doesn't feel like a beginning to them, but it sure looks like a beginning on your side of the screen. It's time to go again, bookmark this and pull one of these or smash them together.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great point. Like, and when you say like having new beginnings in the course of a
Mhm,
campaign, like
mhm,
you could do that with the tiers of play, right?
mhm,
Like 5th editions is designed around, okay, first tier play is levels 1 through 4, second tier play is levels, 5 through 10, right? So if you think of it that way, then and have those moments to breathe between those tiers, and then, so you could skip a month of time or even a year of time between those tiers of play. So like the players just got to level 5 after beating, a low level boss. You could skip some time and then come in with a new thing off of this list, and
mhm,
then you flash back to, well, what have you guys been doing for the past year,
mhm,
right?
mhm. The next one on the list is kind of the opposite of that, and that's the prison break, where it's like you have 0 things,
Right.
0 things, which, like, you're not gonna get a buy you're gonna get buy-in from, like, a particular kind of player, and that's the kind of player I want on my table, honestly, but, you have your abilities and stuff, your AC is 10 plus your dex.
Yeah, I've done that before, and the only hitch that I have is, nowadays, like, the players use D&D Beyond to make their characters, and it
Mhm.
automatically gives you your starting equipment, and you
Yes.
and you have to, like, let everybody know, don't choose that option. When you make your character in D&D Beyond, you don't have any equipment. Just delete that stuff.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
I
a
I I
blessing
love
and a
I
curse.
love the prison break scenario, because again, it introduces that old school feel of like, okay, we have to get some gear because
Mhm.
you're starting with nothing. So, at that point it can becomes very satisfying when you find a rusty sword and a wooden shield. Like it's better than nothing.
Yeah, yeah. When have you ever seen someone be like, "Sweet, 50 feet of rope?" Like, in this scenario, like, "Oh, I found a flask of oil." Like, this is incredibly valuable now. It's not a default it's not on my character sheet, and I'm gonna forget I even have it. It's like, I'm gonna MacGyver every scrap of everything that I find. I'm gonna think outside of the box. I'm gonna get creative with it. Yeah, it's a different kind of game, at least for a little bit, and then you build your kit, you escape, obviously, hopefully, and we get back to, like, more traditional D&D, but you do have an opportunity at the beginning of a campaign to make it feel different for a minute before momentum kicks in and the system takes over.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the great things about low level play, right? So like
Mm,
first, second, third level play, you can add a lot of those old school elements. So
mm,
if you want to do gear and loot is really important, you can do like the prison break scenario, right? Or you can, if you want to do like a horror theme, right? You can
Mm,
do that when the characters are still like second level, when like there's a real threat of death, right? And so if you want to add some of those like old school elements into your fifth edition games, first, second, third level, those are the times to do it. And the prison break, it gives you the a great way to like make gear valuable and get players not thinking on their character sheet, but thinking in the world. Okay, what can I do with this flask of oil and this 50 feet of rope? You know, I can make a flaming whip, or
mhm,
whatever. They come
mhm.
up with like crazy ideas when they're backed into a corner like that.
And if you can, yeah, if you can start there, you can kind of like establish that kind of thinking. I think a lot of these, um, as people who have thought about this game a lot, I think a lot of these have that like kind of built in. It's like, how do we get them to think about what their character would do in the situation, thinking integrated into the world.
Like the funeral scenario or the mystery scenario, right? You're
Mhm,
putting the emphasis on role play at very early on in the campaign
mhm,
because you're throwing them into this situation with character drama going on and they're at the center of attention. And so that sets a tone of, okay, role playing is important in this campaign. I need to not just think about my class abilities and my combat abilities, and again, the prison break gives you a chance for those as well, right? The prison break,
mm,
when you don't have any gear and you're not wearing any armor, that's a great time to talk your way out of things.
yes. And it makes it feel awesome when you get those things. Again, valuing the 50 feet of rope, but like, all right, now you're level 3, your subclass comes online, and for the first time this campaign, you are actually like geared up the way like the PHB expects you to be at one, and now you feel incredibly powerful.
Right.
Versus, you start there, it doesn't feel like anything. You haven't earned it, you haven't gained it, you haven't fought and sweat for it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and that goes to player buy-in, right? When the players like
Mm,
earn that gear, right, instead of just start with everything they need, there's more of a buy-in to like, oh no, this sword is important because I killed an orc to get that sword, and this spell book's important because we snuck into the mage's tower before we escaped the prison in order to get this spell book. Like now there's a story behind your equipment because you had to fight to get it or sneak to get it, right?
yeah, everything has a story. Everything has a story built into it. And you have a built-in again, you have a good antagonist there because like, you want them to hate your big bad, and the big bad's already won. The big bad beat him once already. Like, whatever that faction is that's gonna be driving the campaign, like, has already made their presence felt on like, put the boot on the neck of the player characters, and now they're not gonna stop until they right that wrong, until they overcome that whoever imprisoned them, right? That's a juicy hook.
Yeah. And I think, rightfully so, the Out of the Abyss campaign
Mm.
gets talked about as one of the better 5th edition adventures, at least the beginning part of it. I know some
I
people
think
complain.
it's a little shaky in the middle, but it's a good start, and it's got a lot of potential at the end there, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, there's um, that's most of the feedback I've heard. I've never run Out of the Abyss, but that's most of the feedback I hear about it is like, you can trim a lot of fat out of the middle, but it's a really good start and there's potential for some really good ending.
Like, that beginning it's not the first time that beginning's been used in a D&D module. Night Below, I couldn't think of it for a second, but
Oh,
it's
yeah.
very similar to Night Below. It's like you start in the Underdark with nothing, um, and that, like, yeah, because I like that, like, survival tone of the game, especially at low levels. And then they outgrow that, right? It gives you room, be it, a tabletop role playing game or Legends of Zelda or whatever. Your character's constantly improving, and it feels good versus like plateauing. If you start awesome and nothing can scare you, nothing can touch you, you don't feel that growth. You don't feel that achievement. Versus like started from the bottom. Now we're here. Is a different kind of story.
It's not a unique start, right? Because anybody who's used to any of the Elder Scrolls games, right?
Mm,
From Morrowind to Oblivion to Skyrim, you start every one of those games as a prisoner, right? So it's
mhm.
it's it's part of the fantasy RPG zeitgeist because of those games, and most of your players have played at least one of those games, right?
Yeah, and it's I mean, it's Conan, it's like Gladiator in some respects, like,
Oh
there's
yeah,
all there's different
that's
ways
a
to
great
get to
reference
that,
point.
like yeah, you're in the f I mean, you really wanna start with combat? Like, put him in the fighting pits, okay, cool. Now it's a prison break, right? Like, we'll get that combat out of our system. I see a lot of newer dungeon masters, and newer players, honestly, too. Maybe even like reinvent the wheel or come up with something like perfectly original. They're afraid of cliches and tropes, and like, you're not going to come up with something brand new.
No,
It's going to be cool if you make it your own version of the thing. If no one's ever done it before, maybe there's a reason, or maybe they have and you haven't heard about it because nobody liked it. So don't be afraid of like, oh, this has been done before. It's like not your way.
no.
Right? Start taking 2 things that have happened before and smash them together, and then there's a new thing.
Yeah, I mean, the '90s was all about how many different ways can we remake Die Hard, right? Um, I
And they were
mean,
mostly good.
yeah, like most of Steven Seagal's movies are just like a remake of Die Hard. It's like Die Hard on a train, Die Hard on a
Oh god.
battleship.
Yes.
It's the same concept. You're just redoing it, but it's different because it's a different lead actor and it's not in a you know a mega tall building.
There's nothing new under the sun, so don't panic when you think you came up with something original and you recognize it as something else because like, the thing you're recognizing already has stolen it from a copy of from a copy from a copy, and they've made it their own, like and that's beautiful. Like, that's the way art works. It's cool. Lean
Yeah,
into it.
and ultimately, no idea survives contact with the player characters, right? It's like so even if you stole the idea from like a old Shakespeare play or an old movie that you saw,
Mhm.
once the players get involved, it's going to go sideways and it's going to have twists, and you're going to find a way to like bring it back around. Or my favorite thing to do is when the players come up with a really good idea that you haven't thought of, you're like, that's the new ending. We're going that way. That's that's not who I thought the bad guy was, but that's better
Yes.
than who I thought it was. So we're going that way now.
That is yeah, that is awesome. I've had more experience, like, almost like the reverse of that, where like, "Well, I thought this was the bad guy, but I guess he's now your favorite NPC." Uh, um, but it is cool because you're outnumbered, right? There's more brains on the other side of the dungeon master screen,
Right.
um, and they're working together against you in some ways. So, like, yeah, steal from your favorite stuff and steal from the players. If they come up with something, like, they don't gotta know that they came up with it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Whatever you
And,
do,
like
don't tell them afterwards that that wasn't the plan.
and it's like and that's the magic. Again, that's what keeps it fun. This is happening all together collaboratively, collectively, and I get to experience that's why I lean into randomization a lot too. I get to experience as much as they do
Right.
the world doing stuff, and we have a better viewpoint on it when your world starts to do when your big bad does a thing because it makes sense because there's a power vacuum got created by the players, and like that's not what you thought they would do, but it's what makes sense for the character to do. That's wild. That's like that's the good stuff for me. That's the fun stuff for me when the world starts doing things on its own.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I call my campaign prep process the get even campaign prep
Get
process.
even.
Get even.
Okay.
Because I mean, one of the reasons is because there are 5 steps and each step starts with an even number. So it's like,
Mm,
you know, two key locations, 4 feuding factions, right? So all the things are even numbers, but the get even idea is that you have this campaign that you've built and you want the NPCs to react to the players, right?
mhm,
So the players do something and what's the consequences of that? Who
mhm,
wants to get even? Who wants to settle the
mhm.
score, right? Um, so that's the other half of my get even campaign prep steps.
If you're in prison, there's NPCs in there with you. And,
Right.
like, maybe they have a good reason for being in there, and they're getting out with you, and now here's, like, is if it's not the consequences of our actions coming to call, right? Maybe it's not the big bad, who imprisoned you, maybe it was, your old cellmate, and now you have a very interesting dramatic tension there.
That's right. The guy they like who helped them escape the prison, right? He could actually turn out to be the big bad. That could be a
Mhm,
plot twist that comes out of it. And you're responsible for breaking him out of prison as much as he is responsible for getting you out of prison. And now, the terrible things he's doing is on your conscience, and you've
Yeah, go.
now you're really motivated to stop the bad guy because you kind of half created the bad
Yeah, I like the. I'm having like flashes of Con Air.
guy.
When
Yes. Oh, that's a great classic movie reference.
oh man, that's a good one. What's next on our list?
The 0 level funnel, and of course, that's
Mm,
taken from, you know, Dungeon Crawl Classics, and now Shadowdark does a 0 level play version, and there's a lot of the old school games that use this 0 level idea. But it's a great way to start an adventure where instead of making up a character, and bringing a full-fledged first level, second, third level character to the game, you get 4 level characters. So instead of the players showing up with like first, second, or third level characters, right? They start the game with 4 level characters, and then it's a survival game, right? So however many characters live through the first session, those are the characters that you get to make your starting character from.
mm.
So if you start with 4 characters and 3 of them die, well, that's the one that's left is the one you're playing for this campaign. Unless maybe there's somebody across the table who had 3 of their characters live, and you could pick one of the ones that they're not going to use, right? So that's kind of the agreement going in, is that you have these 4 level characters, and hopefully enough survive that you can make your characters for the next game.
I like the deadly game, right? Like I'm not killing a player character every night by any stretch. It sounds like it half the time I talk, but I like having the specter of death at the table because it creates stakes.
Yeah.
So to have a meat grinder to start, where it's like, all right, 80% of these characters will be dead by the time we finish this one shot.
Yep.
Like that sets the tone. That sets the tone.
Yeah, well, and that again harkens back to like the old school D&D. Like that
Mm,
meat grinder idea was one of the ways that they would run D&D at conventions back in the day.
mhm,
So, you'd start with, you know, like a bunch of DMs at a bunch of different tables, and it was a meat grinder, and if your character survived your table, you got to move on to the next table, and by the end of the convention, only like 2 or 3 people had survived the dungeon, right? And they were kind of that's how you win D&D is the meat grinder.
again, that built-in growth. If you start as a commoner, you're not like level one's gonna feel awesome when you start at level 0, right? Like, oh, I got a spell slot. I have a spell slot I get to use. Like that's gonna feel great.
5th edition, of course, doesn't have a like 0 level rules. So real quick, I'll throw out the basic rules I use for doing 0 level play. So 0 level characters only have a +1 proficiency bonus, and they get a background. So that basically you're
Mm,
starting with 2 skills
mm,
because of your background. And if you want to do starting equipment, you can have the starting equipment that comes with your background only because you're not picking a
mm,
class.
mm,
And then your 0 level characters get the weapon proficiencies equal to that of a sorcerer, because the sorcerer has the fewest weapon proficiencies in the game.
mm.
So that way, if somebody chooses a sorcerer, they're not gaining any weapon proficiencies. But you don't run into that situation where you have weapon proficiencies at 0 level, and then you level up to level 1, and you actually lose something.
Interesting. Yes.
So it's a +1 proficiency bonus. You get a background, and then you get the weapon proficiencies equal to that of a sorcerer, and that's basically how you start. And if you want to, the other thing I've done with 0 level is one of your 4 characters can have the magic initiate feat. That way, at
Mm.
least one of your 4 characters has some cantrips and one spell they can cast.
To have like your background maybe featuring a feat, like be your class essentially for a minute is gonna make that feel important, right? Because so many people you ignore your background at the end
Right.
of the day, right? Like maybe you're using it for role play, but like you picked one that like, oh, that got you the one extra skill that you were looking for or something. And now it's like you can pick whatever you want, so it doesn't really matter. But like if you're fighting with a pitchfork because you're a farmer, like that's meaningful. That means a lot. And the day you get your short sword, it's gonna feel cool. If you're running around with a club, the next what your rapier is gonna feel awesome instead of a given.
Right.
Yeah, and it's just it's a different game. You want to get ahead. You want the biggest numbers, but like giving yourself room to grow, like being comfortable, like forget one, we're starting at zero. Like that's way more fun. That can be way more fun because there's more room to grow. Like no one's playing level 15. There's a reason why. The game breaks down, it becomes less fun. So maybe we think about, level -1 funnels. Right?
Yeah, but one of the times I ran a level 0 funnel, was funny because one of the players decided, "Okay, this is the one of the 4 that I'm going to make sure lives," and
Mm,
he gave that character, like, a cool name, and then the
mm,
other 3 of his 0 level characters, he named, like, Dave and Jeff and something else, right? But the character he gave a cool name was the first one to die. Like, the opening
perfect.
scene, that character died.
Perfect.
So by the end, he was left with a tiefling named Jeff,
I
and that
love it.
and that was his character for the rest of the campaign.
Oh god.
And he was the type of player that totally embraced that. Like he thought it
Yeah.
was hilarious. He loved that idea, and Jeff became like his favorite character for a long time.
That's the things that you discover, or like the times that you made room for the magic and like something happened. Like that's yeah, that's where the secret sauce is.
Yeah,
Like, yeah, a tiefling mage. I mean, it sounds like I don't know, it sounds like a sitcom going back to the 90s or something. But like, yeah, that becomes your favorite. You didn't know, like, you were gonna make that the same thing you've played through 3 times already, right? Because 'Cause you're
right.
good at it, you know how it works, and suddenly you're a tiefling named Jeff, and you gotta figure out, "All right, how is Jeff gonna make it in a world like this?" And then he's your favorite.
Right. Yeah.
So we're getting to the end here. I mean, I think we probably have already hit more than 10. We've been riffing a little bit, but number 9 on the list is a shipwreck. Ship or train. We were talking about different versions of Steven Seagal movies, but like I like a sandboxy kind of game, but like with the beginning can be very much be on rails. And if you're on a ship, there's a natural disaster. We're talking about skill challenges, and now we're talking about the equivalent of a like low level survival type of game, where like you're on this island, you're not getting off of this island. Maybe you're not alone on this island, and what you've got is what you got. You're not going to the big city on the coast until you figure out how to make a raft, and you got to survive long enough to do that. And here we are, and it's good to, especially for like newer players maybe, or a newer dungeon master, to like start small, right? So many people, I've done several videos where I talk about how the beginning of the dungeon master's guide is build continents and a pantheon and a creation myth, and like you'll never get to play, and by the time you do, no one's going to care about that stuff, so it's not going to feel good. make
Right.
an island make an island, put one feature in the middle of it, scatter some monsters, hit the ground running. You can figure out who's in the sky later. Like,
Yeah.
build what you're going to have the players interact with first and foremost.
Right. Yeah. Just a couple simple locations is all you need to start with, and a shipwreck is a great way to put your players in that position where you know they're landed on a beach and there's 2 options. You wanna go that way to the little village, or you wanna go that way to the strange ruins. All you know is that you're on a beach in a storm and you gotta find shelter. What do you do next?
What do you do? I mean, maybe it was sabotage. Maybe it was, an act of the gods or something. There's a million ways to take it, but like, yeah, and anything could be on this island too, right? Like insert dungeon here. I want them to go into the Sunless Citadel. Like you're on an island with the Sunless Citadel. Eventually, you're gonna walk in that door.
That's right. The, the one time that I remember specifically starting with a shipwreck, I had the players get attacked by the I can never know how to pronounce the shark people.
Sahagwin, which I think is wrong, but I say it hard. I put a lot of like weird accents in it, so like that's what it's called in my world. Sahagwin.
Yeah, I try to say it though like it's Klingon, like Sahuagin.
Yeah, yeah, feels right. Feels right.
Um, but
Yeah, I
yeah,
ran, I ran Salt Marsh and like I spent hours thinking about that, just like in the showers trying to say that word.
that's a great place to work on your NPC character voices too.
Yes, very much.
But yeah, so the paladin got dropped to 0 3 different times in the very
Mm,
first fight on the
mm,
beach because of the Sahuagin or Sahuagin, and, and so for the rest of that campaign, like, they were the nemesis.
mm,
Like, the characters just hated these shark people because
yes.
they almost died at the hands of these shark people right after they landed on the beach, and so it was just this vendetta against the shark people. And I didn't plan it that way. That's just like I just happened to roll crits. Like they'd heal the paladin, I'd roll another crit, and he'd go down again.
I'm sorry, that's what the dice say. That's what the dice say, that's what happens.
So I think we're down to our last one, right?
This is it, yeah. Give me 10.
Yeah, so the last one is just bringing the band together. So
Mm,
this is where you start the game and nobody knows each other. So you don't plan ahead in session 0. You can have your session 0 and set ground rules or whatever, or, determine, you know, how you're going to roll stats or that sort of thing. But you don't do the pre-planning that, is often recommended, and you just start the game where the characters don't know each other. And one way to do that is like you're all in the middle of town. Where are you going? Kind of like we did with the sinkhole, right?
mhm,
You're in town. What store are you at? What store are you at? Where are you at? Right? And then something happens. The town gets attacked, right? Or the orcs invade or the riot breaks out, right? So you can still do that like strong start with some sort of combat, but then it's about like how do we regroup after this combat, and who are you and why did you help me and what's going on, and like you're figuring out like the whole first game or two is the player characters figuring out why they're going to work together, who they are,
mm.
and how they're going to overcome whatever this obstacle is that's set up in the middle of this town.
This may be the one I've done the most because of not by choice, but by by circumstance, right? Like, running in the real world sometimes, you don't know who's showing up, especially day 1, especially trying to get a campaign off the ground, right? You got 8 maybes and you're hoping for at least 2 players so you can run a game sometimes, you know? Or you're going down to the game shop or whatever, you're in a convention scenario or something, so there isn't that time for that, you know, preamble work. So I've done this quite a bit, and I think it's okay to push some of the responsibility or a lot of the responsibility onto the players, right?
Hmm.
How do you know each other? You don't. Okay, cool. You're going to figure out reasons to care about each other, to be invested in the same motivations. Like you're trying to save your town. That's a good one to start. But like you figure out, you form connections in front of us. Like I, the dungeon master, have my own set of jobs to perform. Here's your role in this game tonight.
Right, and that can be the focus of session 0. I feel like a lot of session 0s are trying to figure out why are you all together? How do you know each other? Why are you going on this quest together? But instead, you can spend your session 0 in this case just going over the rules of improv. Like don't say
Mm,
no,
mm,
say yes and or yes but. Like um,
mm, mm,
going over like how to be collaborative in your storytelling and how not to isolate another player or put them in that versus situation. You can go over your rules for good collaborative storytelling in your session 0 because you're not spending time figuring out who belongs to who in this group. And then you do that in session. You do that as part of the game. How do you know each other? And this is a great one to combine with the 0 level funnel, right?
mm,
Because
mm.
with a 0 level funnel, you're gonna have like if you have 5 players and they all have 4 0 level characters, that's like 20 characters. There's no background there. Like, unless, you know, I mean, other than that you're all from the same town, right? But
Right.
that's one way of like bringing the band together, and the 0 level funnel can go hand in hand
Mm,
is because you have these
mm.
20 0 level characters, and some
That
of
is
them
the town.
that is the town, right?
That
These are
is the
all
town.
yeah, these are all the people of fighting age in the town, right?
Mhm.
Or a village. Like a village might not have much
Right,
more than 20 people, right? So this
right.
village, you are the village. The 20, I mean, maybe there's some elders and maybe there's some kids, but you are the adults of this village. The 20 of you make up this village, and you're just a bunch of 0 level villagers. And now you have to figure out who's going to be whom, and who's going to be the hero, and who's going to become the wizard, and all those sorts of things, and kind of like bring that band together. Who's left out of this 0 level funnel, and who are these characters now that they survive this attack on the town or this natural disaster that hit the town.
Because it can be very cool to have, like, a nice origin story that brings everybody together, but to let that organically arise in play and to actually experience it together is going to make that much stronger at the end. You know, it's if you're at level 1 and you describe what happened at level 0 because you know, 'cause you're raring to get to the later content, okay, nothing wrong with that, but, like, if you experienced that, if you played through it, and you didn't know who was gonna live or die, and this is what that's what happened. Again, it comes down to, like, that realism, that verisimilitude that we love to talk about, like, that this is what happened. It's not a backstory that I wrote and, like, you didn't read all of. It's what happened. It's what we were there. You were there. You know exactly what happened. You went through it with me, and now we are bonded together in a way that we wouldn't have been if we had met in the tavern.
Yeah. Well, and this bringing the band together idea for like your first session um is like you said, it's the way I've done most adventures that I've run. Like not recently, right? Because I mean, if I'm remembering right, the whole idea of a session 0 is probably only about 10 years old, maybe
It's
12.
it's yeah, it's pretty recent. I mean, I've been doing it about 10, and I did not hear it day 1. I think it's fairly I mean, it was a more niche thing, let's put it that way. It wasn't as widely adapted, and so it feels like the last, like, 4 or 5 years is when it, like, has become mainstream to the point of, like, being assumed.
Right, exactly. So I would say, so for me, that's a couple of or a few decades of play before I knew what a session 0 was.
Mm,
So yeah, so the idea of like all the characters knowing each other ahead of time, that's for me was relatively new. Like I didn't start doing that until I started playing 5th edition. So, 2014 timeframe.
mhm.
So yeah, so for years, this was how I started games, bringing the band together. A bunch of like ne'er do wells who don't know each other, and you throw them in a situation, and it leads to a lot of improv in your first session.
Mm.
But so you have to be prepared for that improv. But it's a really fun way, as you know, it's a fun way to start a game because there's not like a set hook. There's not like you just basically have a strong start, and you're just going to let the players figure it out.
And yeah, just, like, foster that discovery. I didn't know this about my character until your character asked.
Right.
And
Yep.
now I didn't even know that was a question. Now I gotta come up with an answer. And now that's canon.
So there you go. That's 10 ways to not start in a tavern. And thanks for making it this far into the video. If you watched this whole thing, I appreciate you hanging with us. But I feel like there's a lot of good content in there. And if you appreciated that and enjoyed that, let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't watched the other 5 of these that we did on Ryan's channel, go over to Verdigris Table and check it out. I'll put a link in the description below to his half of this video. And if you're new here and you came over from Ryan's channel to check out the rest of this, thanks again for being here and checking out my channel. Hopefully you'll find a lot of other great content on here that you will enjoy. I work hard to generate a lot of stuff for you guys to watch. And the ultimate message here is that there is no wrong way to do Dungeons and Dragons. As long as you and your friends are having fun at your table, you're doing it right. But we want to be able to generate interesting and new ideas so you can keep your game fresh and exciting and entertaining for both you and your players. And I hope we accomplish that. But once again, thanks for visiting the Dire Den, and I'll see you next time.